Morning all. I thought we could look at the third encounter of Mikhail Tal and Fischer in the Curacao Cands tournament of 1962. Actually, there wasn't going to be a fourth encounter because Mikhail Tal had problems with his kidneys. He had to be taken to hospital, and actually there's an iconic photo you'll find, I'll put a link in the description of this video to it, of Bobby Fischer visiting Mikhail Tal in hospital. And they're playing chess, of course, on a mini little set. So anyway, in this last classical encounter, they did play again in 1917 a couple of blitz games in the ΔµΔ blitz, but this was the last classical game encounter in this tournament. So round 18. Mikhail Tal, for anyone that doesn't know, is a Soviet-Latvian chess grandmaster, the 8th world chess champion from 1960 to 61. Only for 1 year, but his impact on chess is huge. One of the most widely loved players of all time, widely regarded as a creative genius and the best attacking player of all time. He played in a daring combinatorial style. His play was known above all for improvisation and unpredictability. Every game, he once said, was imitable and invaluable as a poem. Inimitable and invaluable as a poem. Often called Misha, a diminutive for Michail and the Magician of Riga. So, and many game collections feature him heavily, his games for, in brilliancy game collections. They use often a lot of Tal games. He is also a highly regarded chess writer and holds records for the first and second longest unbeaten streaks in competitive chess history, and that is very unusual for an attacking player. It's not as though he went out of his way not to be defeated. His play was often, very dynamic, sacrificial, and exciting. And the Mikhail Tal Memorial is held in Moscow annually since 2006 to honour Tal's memory. So e4 from Mikhail. Fischer plays classically with e5, no Sicilian here in their last encounter. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and now Fischer plays quite a rare bird. He plays actually bishop c5. Okay, this is still quite a popular system, Archangelist type system, so the bishop is hoping to be really good on this diagonal later. And there are some downsides sometimes with this bishop if it's going to pin this knight, but does this knight really have to go to f6? We see c3, and that's another slight issue picked up on there. d4 with tempo against that bishop could be useful. But to avoid any potential pin, this next move looks very logical in some respects, but it's still not the most popular. The most popular is knight f6. 214 games of knight f6, f5 141, queen f6 55, dropping the bishop back, 39. Now this next move was actually knight ge7. So this is about 30 games with this. d4, ed, cd. At least that this pin, black can play f6 against the pin. We see check. Okay, and here you might think, isn't knight c3 okay in this position? Knight c3 is only one game. Apparently it's not that hot. 5 times it's played bishop d2. Maybe black can react strongly with d5. Let's have a quick look at the game which was with that. I think d5 and black's okay here really. It's about equal. So I think bishop d2 looks a bit maybe odd rather than knight c3 taking the opportunity to develop more. But bishop d2 is played. It weakens black potentially on the dark squares. White potentially has got c5 on that semi-open file, pressure on the c file, and maybe c7 later if d5 can be achieved. Then c7 is the target structurally. So bishop takes d2. Now queen takes d2, reserves knight c3 for the knight. a6, bishop a4, and now black plays d5. Now I think, like the previous mentioned variation, I think e5 just gives black an easier time actually here, and e takes d5 is more testing. Well, let's put on a bit. So I think e takes d5, accepting the isolated queen's pawn, which I know can cause dread and doom and disaster later, but that is the way to go here, because White has got good pressure on that C file as well here. He's got extra perks, not just the E file when he opens up the E file. And on E5, you know, that F5 square is useful to black immediately as well. So I think E5 really... Furthermore though, bishop G4 is justifying the knight on C6. There's immediate pressure, there's an immediate threat to double the pawns. This is already actually better for black, believe it or not, this position. So actually E5 is fairly unpalatable here. So we see E takes D5. It seems correctly, in inverted commas, accepting the isolated queen's pawn. Knight takes D5 is interesting, but queen takes D5, an alternative, offering a free tempo it seems, but the white king's in the centre. Okay, and you might think, well, surely in this position, well, maybe, you know, castles. I think castling, there might be a problem with, well, bishop E6, or the queen goes back. There's no. Is it a big deal for white to win a tempo like this? Perhaps not. But anyway, so it's played now with the king in the centre, which does allow check. And Michail, he's keeping the tension on here. He's obviously got the option of queen E3, but he plays instead king F1. Maybe objectively queen E3 should be considered as well. I think queen E3, say both sides castle. Black doesn't really want to repair white and give, you know, the F file pressure. I think white is slightly better here overall, at least like from an engine perspective. But it's without the queens on, it's a little bit more maybe dull the position. So this decision not to forfeit castling, okay, keeps the queens on, and we do see that in a lot of Tal games that sometimes he's really avoided queens being exchanged. He's even like danced with the opponent's queen for several moves in some games to the extreme to keep the queens on. So check king G1. So here, okay, how can this rook be developed though later? Isn't this a bit of a problem? Interestingly here, Fischer just castled kind of routinely. Maybe a slightly more accurate move might be bishop E6 just to prevent D5, just restraining the isolated queen's pawn. It seems castling does allow this move D5, and perhaps this might have been a miscalculation here of some sort, because it's kicking the knight away from like central control, and if white can get to C7 later on the C file, or if he can sort out this rook especially, then C7 could be a problem. I think if we imagine this might have been a miscalculation because of rook D8, white has a very, very powerful resource here, which is the only move to really gain advantage. I wonder if you can spot it. If I give you 10 seconds starting from now, what would you play here in this position? Which I think maybe have been missed, that the full impact of this has been missed, this particular move here. Okay, I think it's queen E1 because it keeps an eye on E8, and it looks so black's taking on D5, but then we have bishop B3, and this is a big advantage for white because, you know, the queen's threatening that E8. So with D5 being achieved here, I know black's losing material here now, but with D5 being achieved, white is all of a sudden getting definitely a clearer advantages emerging. That C7 issue on the C file is a potential problem, but for the moment we see rook E1, just trying to drive black's pieces away. Again, knight F5, taking that central file, and the knight is the better knight here. Look at that knight on A7. Black's rooks are not connected yet. And okay, white's not without his problems. He wants to do something about this rook, and he actually plays H3 with the potential idea of G4 just to kick that knight, maybe give the king one of these two squares, and his rooks to then be connected. Fischer plays though knight B5, so the knight coming back to life from A7. And actually this is taken, doubling black's pawns there. A takes, and bishop B3, so it looks as though the rook's not really doing much against that A2 pawn, so some structural damage. Now after queen c5, the queen's still a target on this c file here, and this is finally used now with rook c1. So queen d6, and that's c7, the backward pawn on the same amount of file, and we have double pawns here. So Mikhail Tal here seems to be objectively slightly better. He plays queen c3, pressure on c7. Okay, now a very strong move here from Fischer, just bishop d7. For the moment the knight is protecting the queen. So queen takes c7 would be a huge blunder. Rook fc8, and we're winning the rook. The rooks are not connected yet, this is a big issue. So here, this is like winning for black, check, then taking here with check, and then taking the queen. So that c7 pawn is immune here. So we see actually g4. And now Fischer plays a fantastically accurate move in this position. Well, the only move really, I think, in practical terms. Because let's imagine he moves the knight back to e7. Queen takes c7. Does black have any compensation for this c-pawn here? If queen g6, we can start mopping up pieces. Black's best might be rook a6. It's just a miserable position, this position here. King g2, and white's connected the rooks, and it's virtually all over. So no, Fischer needs a move here, and he's got a resource, a great resource, which nearly like keeps the balance really in the position. Can you spot what black plays in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now, let me flip the board. What would you play here with black? So you're about to lose c7 if you move the knight to e7. Okay, knight g3. So it threatens knight e2 check. It's a piece sacrifice. And it doesn't seem to be immediately clear what it does, because f3 is protected at the moment. So knight g3. Okay, does white really want to take on c7 here? Well, knight e2 check now. And let's have a look at this continuation. Knight f4, king f1. This is still actually nice for white's this position, but there's a line I've looked at in preparation for this video, which goes like this, that it shows that black has resources like bishop b5 here, and this d pawn might actually be vulnerable because of this pin, because of the slight disconnection of rooks, that black might be able to technically like get a drawish rook and pawn ending. So anyway, in the game it was actually taken here, this knight, allowing check, king f1, and now Fischer, with this piece sacrifice, the king on f1 here, it's logical to try and use this rook, so f5, try and blast open this f file. White wants to keep this line closed and plays g5, and then we see f4, which means that the bishop takes h3 might be a threat under certain circumstances, be very effective here. But f5 is not without a downside. This diagonal can be used, and it is used, with d6 check, which means actually the bishop's given d5 critically to help defend f3 in some lines. So here, after king h8, bishop d5 here is not actually that hot though. Bishop takes h3 check, and if we get this situation with c takes d6, even though the bishop is defending the knight, this isn't as good as just taking on c7 first. So taking on c7 so there's no c-file issue for white. So he wants to take on c7, and he reserves this possibility of bishop d5 for a moment more. Now if black really did want to take in this position, I think actually this is already kind of drawish. Already Michail seems to have a perpetual check option here. It'll be too dangerous. I mean, it starts to get a little bit scary if the king goes over here, check, and this is not good. This is not good news at all. So I think it's already, the perpetual check options are kind of evident here after d takes c7. We're reaching a dynamic equality. Rook ae8 carries with it a major threat of rook e3, but also there's a threat of b4, and to introduce bishop b5 check is quite dangerous as well. b4 is actually the more significant threat for bishop b5, to try and get this queen away from defending f3. Let's just demonstrate that dynamic here. Say a4, b4, queen d3, bishop b5, to just get the queen away from f3. Queen takes f3. Now f3 here, and this is very, very bad news for white. So Fischer has to be careful in this kind of position, not to be mated. So he doesn't play a3. He plays actually in this position he plays bishop d5, actually inviting the possibility of rook e3 here, which seems quite scary, as well as bishop takes h3, of course. Let's have a quick look at rook e3 in this position. If rook e3 here, let's have a look at queen d2. Say rook takes f3, takes. Now not queen f2, we don't want to lose everything with queen takes h1 here. No, king g1 protecting the rook. And again, it's a kind of perpetual check situation. This might actually be dangerous because of f3 here. So queen g2 just to stop black playing f3. Check, and now king h2 here. And in this position, I mean, this is all very sharp stuff actually. White shouldn't be playing queen g3. Again, he'll be in big trouble. If we reach this position, rook cf1 against that rook, and this should be holding the balance. It's all a bit scary stuff, just with rook e3 here, but it had to be checked out if white can defend. But there's the other option which is used here. Instead of rook e3, bishop takes h3 check. It looks as though Tal's playing black because it's the attack. Keep thinking that Tal's playing black. No, Fischer is playing black against Tal, and playing this dynamic piece sacrifice. So bishop takes h3, and now we reach this perpetual check situation like this. After king f2, they agreed a draw, so it's like it would be just perpetual check at minimum. I don't think black can try for any more. Let's say rook e3. Then white actually has a very good resource here, exploiting a weakness of the last move. Can you spot it? What would white play here? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now, what would Mikhail Tal play in this position? Okay, this c7 pawn is not just pretty, it's effective here, and this would be very, very good. This would be winning. So the rook e3 is not on cards. Tal's just gone for the perpetual check. Okay, and their overall score for those interested in classical games, Mikhail Tal was one of those Russians with a positive score against Fischer. He beat Fischer 4-2 overall with 5 draws. All 4 of Tal's wins against Fischer were at the previous candidates tournament of 1959, but I believe they really became good friends as a result of that encounter. But I think they became good friends. They were joking with each other. Tal was joking about signing Fischer's score sheet for him at the end of that, and I just get the impression that there's a great deal of admiration and love from Fischer to Mikhail Tal, and many books and literature do reflect that. There's some very iconic pictures of Tal and Fischer together and smiling. It does seem there's a great friendship and admiration there, and these two players are with the biggest fan base, I think, not just on YouTube, just generally for chess players, for the fantastic games that they've created. Okay, and this was their last classical game encounter. So a very exciting draw, as draws go. I hope you'll agree. And in 1970 Blitz, actually Fischer managed to beat Tal 2-0. Tal was later also, by the way, to become a World Blitz chess champion. So Fischer, by winning that 1970, became World Blitz champion 1970, and that was regarded as the first official World Blitz championship, 1970. But Tal won it in a later year, and so did Kasparov and other great players. So, okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.